When I was younger, there was a series of games my dad got that blew my tiny mind. It allowed me to control massive armies of fantasy units, with heroes that could cast war-changing spells, and it was simple enough for me to understand as a kid, but it had so much depth that even to this day I learn something each time I pick it up. Though the series is still around today, it hasn't been as interesting as it was back in the early 2000s, and because of its recent lackluster entries, I thought I'd outgrown this cherished franchise. But out of a spontaneous eBay purchase, I found myself caught up in its loop once again. Heroes of Might and Magic is one of my iconic childhood memories. I remember playing this game so much that the music, sprites, and tactics I learned back then are so thoroughly engraved in my mind that I've probably replaced some important life function just to make room for them. Specifically though, I've learned a lot about Heroes 3, which is my favorite in the series and rightfully so. But my first Heroes game was Heroes of Might and Magic 2: The Succession Wars, which my dad bought, primarily for himself, when I was very young. So when I saw the big box copy of this classic game on eBay, I knew I had to grab it. Sadly though, I didn't get the version I wanted. This copy of Heroes 2 is the gold version, which comes with the game's expansion, The Price of Loyalty, which does add 4 more campaigns as well as new maps and structures for your hero to visit. What it doesn't have though is the original game's soundtrack. If this was any other game, I'd be okay with a change in soundtrack, but I love the original soundtrack so much that playing Heroes 2 without those classic tunes makes it feel like a completely different game. Some songs remain the same, such as the grass theme, but others like the Necromancer's theme are completely different. I love the classic Necromancer's theme, since it reminds me of a mad scientist preparing his abominations for his revenge against the world, while the gold version feels like it should belong to the sorceress who has fairies, unicorns, and other whimsical creatures that fit its lighter mood. It feels mismatched, but I can't say that it sounds bad. In fact, all the music in this game is amazing, from the beating war drums to the ambient music that plays on the world map. It's all expertly crafted, and even the songs I'm not used to, I could see myself loving in time. But I'm a hopeless nostalgia junkie, so I doubt I'll give it the time. There's also the beautiful graphics, which for its time were amazing. Each unit has such a distinct look, each map looks like a map straight from a fantasy story, and the towns are just gorgeous, which all adds to the game's overflowing feeling of polish. Even the sound effects that the units make when they attack or get hurt are great. I feel like I don't remember sound effects as clearly as other aspects of games, but for some reason these sounds just stick to me like glue. But that's enough gushing about presentation. What we're all here for, what we all desire in a game like this, is the nitty-gritty, the heart of the game, the mechanics, and boy is there a lot to talk about. There are 6 factions, 3 good and 3 bad, each one named after the heroes that champion them. The Knight's town is what you'd expect: swordsmen, pikemen, and crusaders, all men plus steel with little in the way of magic. Then there's the Barbarian, who, much like the Knight, is based around well-statted units and big numbers. But unlike the Knight, the Barbarian's themed around trolls, cyclopses, and other big and ugly, but typically strong monsters. The Sorceress's town is full of the previously mentioned unicorns and fairies, but what you wouldn't expect from them is to be as powerful as they are. They could unload a lot of damage, but tend to be weaker, with their only sturdy unit being the Dwarves. The Warlock is a sort of opposite to the Sorceress, since their town is full of hydras, gargoyles, and even dragons. These are sturdy monsters who can be a real pain to dispose of. Then there's the Wizard and his town, which is a sort of mixed bag. All of his units are good, but for different reasons, such as the numerous halflings or the almighty titans. Lastly, we have the Necromancer, which is my immediate favorite in all Heroes games. As you'd expect, they have a lot of dead things, mummies, skeletons, bone dragons, but what's really cool about Necro is that they're the only heroes to have a skill completely unique to them, Necromancy, which raises a certain amount of units that died in battle as skeletons, great for snowballing. Each of these factions have their strengths and shortcomings, but what makes them so cool is that you could take over another hero's town and then use their units for yourself. So you could have, say, the Living Dead hating Crusaders fight along a bunch of power liches, and it only costs everyone's happiness. It's this mixing and matching though that I loved as a kid. Since each town has a super unit, I would try to collect as many as I could on a single hero and then storm every castle with a rigorous zeal that would ultimately be thwarted when I saw how many druids they had. But each faction's endgame unit is something really cool, and to this day, amassing a huge amount of black dragons or titans is one of my favorite things in gaming. But on the other side of things, one aspect of the game I really underestimated as a kid was magic. Magic in the Heroes games can be absolutely insane. Don't you love it when your opponent can seemingly summon an endless supply of elementals? Or how about everyone's favorite spell, Armageddon, which deals a lot of damage to all the units on the field, but there are some creatures, such as the aforementioned black dragons, which are completely immune to magic. So say you're in a pretty high stakes fight, maybe, I don't know, the final battle in the campaign, and you're ready for anything, but your opponent has a ton of dragons, the strongest unit in the game, and every turn he spams Armageddon, damaging everything but the dragons. It's definitely not annoying and frustrating and should totally return in every future game. Yeah, magic is kind of insane, and it only gets worse in the next game. But that's part of the charm of Heroes. It's all about fighting crazy with crazy, and artifacts are definitely a huge help with that. Much like magic, artifacts will end up getting really crazy in Heroes 3, but in Heroes 2 they're just a nice sized boost to your hero and their units. They range from adding stats to your hero, and by extension their units, to having elemental damage to all your units. Though there are even a few artifacts that give your units complete immunity to specific types of spells. Sadly though, there are no artifacts to nullify Armageddon. These can help a lot with specific strategies such as having the cost of summoning elementals, or just making an already powerful hero even stronger. Aside from that though, the only other big game changer is your hero themselves. They have their own stats which affect their spellcasting or their units, but they also have skills which can do a wide variety of things. There are skills that increase the damage shooters do, but there are also skills that get you a little more money each turn. They can be a big help in the macro or micro levels of the game, and there can be some real tough choices to make when your hero levels up. But okay, that's a good chunk of what makes Heroes 2 Heroes 2, but what's the deal? What's so fascinating about this game? Well, that's what I was thinking about before returning to Heroes 2, and I honestly am still not sure. For me, nostalgia is a big factor, but there's also the fun of seeing those numbers under your units get bigger and bigger, and also just slaying hundreds of monsters in one attack. There's also crafting the perfect hero with whatever crazy strategy you come up with, or even taking down an opponent with an already established superhero. I haven't even mentioned the nuances that come with positional plays on the map. Either you're hunting down a hero, or you're escaping the gaze of several stacks of dragons. Either way, there are many ways for one side to beat the other, but it could lead to some unforeseen outcomes if you just blindly pursue or escape a hero. I guess ultimately though, the game is a power fantasy, but it makes the fantasy part more believable with how slippery of a slope this game could be at times. You could be winning by a landslide, but then they research a spell that changes the tides of battle completely. Or maybe you make the right choices and fight the right heroes at the right time, pulling an underdog victory. There are so many ways to dominate, but there's also so many ways to fumble and lose everything, that it adds a little bit of realism to the game. Heroes 2 really feels like a game of grand strategy, but a few clutch plays during the tactical combat can change the course of an entire match. It makes the tactical combat feel worth caring about, unlike 90% of 4X games where tactical combat offers little to no changes to the end result. And it's this mixture of macro and micro, big and small, that makes the game as addicting as it is. Heroes of Might and Magic 2 definitely deserves its reputation as a classic, and after visiting the game in my adulthood, I feel like there's no way I could forget why I love this series as much as I do. If after watching this video you're interested in trying it out, it's on GOG or Good Old Games for a relatively low price, and you could run it on pretty much anything made in the last decade since it came out more than 2 decades ago. And if you want the original expansionless version with the music I love, I'll leave the image files I ripped from my old copy in a Google Drive link below. But that's it for now, my fellow heroes. Until we meet again, I'll be cozying up to a game very similar to this one. Bye!